Kai stared at the blank screen as if it had personally offended him. The morning light was just starting to spill across the room, catching the dust in the air, the mug on the desk, the stack of papers he'd been ignoring for weeks. Today was meant to be the day. No more excuses. No more "I'll get to it later." He rolled his shoulders, took a breath, and said it out loud, as though the words might make it real. "Right. I'll start in 5 minutes." It sounded reasonable. Harmless, even. 5 minutes was nothing. Just enough time to clear a few things off the desk, maybe make a coffee, maybe get himself in the right headspace. But as he reached for his phone to put it aside, a notification lit up the screen. Then another. A quick check wouldn't hurt. Just a look. Just one glance. 10 minutes later, he was still there, thumb flicking mindlessly through a short video he couldn't even remember searching for. He let out a small laugh, half amused and half annoyed with himself. That wasn't the plan, he muttered, though by then the words felt hollow. He stood up, determined to reset. Maybe the desk was the problem. A clearer space, a clearer mind. So he began tidying. Old receipts into one pile. Pens into a cup. A charger he hadn't used in months. The room looked better already, more ordered, more controlled. But the task waiting on the laptop stayed exactly where it was, untouched and quietly accusing. That's the strange thing about procrastination. It rarely feels like doing nothing. It feels busy. It feels like planning, preparing, organizing, waiting for the perfect moment. And the brain is clever enough to make avoidance look productive. Kai knew he had work to do, but somewhere beneath the excuses was a quieter truth he didn't want to face. The task felt heavy. Not impossible, just uncomfortable. The kind of thing that asks for focus, confidence, and the risk of getting it wrong. And the brain, being the brain, hates discomfort. It would rather choose a quick reward, a small distraction, anything that gives relief now. One more check. One more scroll. One more tiny job that feels safer than beginning the thing that matters most. By lunchtime, Kai was sitting in the same chair, staring at the same laptop, with the same knot in his stomach. The day had slipped through his fingers again, and the guilt was already starting to whisper. But what if the problem was never laziness at all? What if the real reason we delay the important things is far more human than that? Kai stared at the screen, waiting for something inside him to click. He had promised himself this would be the day. The one where he'd finally make a proper start, not a fake one. Not a, "I'll just get organized first" kind of start. The laptop sat open, the room was quiet, and the project file was right there, glowing like a challenge he had been avoiding for weeks. But instead of typing, he felt that familiar tug in his chest. Not laziness, exactly. Something heavier. Something quieter. He rubbed his hands together, sighed, and said out loud, "Just 5 minutes." That was always how it began. 5 minutes turned into checking his notifications. A video popped up, then another. A quick scroll, just to clear his head, he told himself. Then he noticed the desk was a bit messy, so he started tidying that. A cup got moved. Papers got stacked. A drawer got opened for no reason at all. By the time he sat back down, his brain had already found a dozen small excuses to stay away from the real work. And that's the strange part about procrastination. It doesn't always look like doing nothing. Sometimes it looks busy. Sometimes it looks practical. Sometimes it even feels responsible. But underneath all that movement is often the same old discomfort. What if this isn't good enough? What if I get stuck? What if I start and realize I'm not as ready as I thought? Kai knew that feeling well, even if he didn't like admitting it. The project wasn't impossible. It was just important. And important things have a way of making people nervous because they matter enough to fail at. That's when the mind starts bargaining. Later. After lunch. After one more cup of tea. After I'm in the right mood. As if the perfect moment is somewhere waiting, fully formed, and all you have to do is catch it. He leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Why is this so hard?" Because the brain is clever that way. It would rather choose something small, easy, and immediate than face something uncertain and demanding. A quick check of the phone gives instant relief. A little tidy up gives instant progress. The project, on the other hand, asks for patience, effort, and the possibility of discomfort. So the brain chooses the path that feels safer right now, even if it costs you later. That's why guilt becomes part of the trap. The longer Kai avoided the task, the heavier it felt. The heavier it felt, the more he wanted to avoid it. And round it went. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Most people don't need more shame. They need a better way in. And Kai was about to discover that the answer wasn't to feel more motivated. It was to make the first step so small that his brain could stop arguing with it. By the time Kai finally sat back down, the room looked the same, but he didn't. The desk was clear now, the notifications were silenced, and the laptop glow felt less like a threat and more like an invitation. He stared at the blank document for a long second, still waiting for that perfect burst of motivation that never seemed to arrive. Then he remembered something that had quietly changed everything. He didn't need to feel ready. He only needed to begin. So he did. One sentence, then another. Nothing brilliant, nothing polished, just a rough start on the page. And strangely enough, once the first few words were there, the task stopped looking like a mountain. It became a path. A little uneven, a bit messy, but passable. Kai let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Right? He muttered to himself, half amused, half relieved. So that's all it took. That's the thing about procrastination. It doesn't usually vanish because we suddenly become more disciplined or because we shame ourselves into action. More often, it loosens its grip when the job stops feeling like a threat. When the brain no longer sees failure, pressure, or perfection waiting at the end of every click, it becomes easier to move. Not easy exactly, just possible. And possible is where momentum begins. Kai didn't finish the whole project in one magical sitting, and he didn't turn into a person who never stalls again. But he did break the cycle. He stopped waiting for a mood that never came. He stopped bargaining with 5 more minutes, then 5 more after that. He learned that guilt is a terrible fuel, and that small starts are far more powerful than grand intentions. Maybe that's where you are too, standing in front of something important, telling yourself you'll begin later. But what if later is just the place procrastination sends us to keep us safe from discomfort? What if the first step has always been smaller than you thought? If this made sense to you, give the video a quiet like so it can reach someone else stuck in the same loop. And if you'd like more simple, honest explanations about how people think, avoid, and finally change, subscribe now. Because the next time your brain says, "Not yet," you'll know exactly what to do.